Hello, everybody. It's Tyler with 3D Printing Basics. If you guys were interested in getting every single episode of this podcast, 3D Printing Basics, ad-free and a week early, and also getting exclusive perks such as exclusive episodes that only you can listen to and more, then subscribe on Patreon. My link will be down below. I would really appreciate it if you guys would consider supporting me. All the support I've already received has meant the world to me, so thank you guys so much. If not, no worries. Continue to consume these episodes for free, and I appreciate you listening regardless. So thank you guys very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 99. We are almost at 100 episodes, and I'm really excited for that one. But in this week's episode, we are going to be talking about the 80-20 rule in 3D printing, and that is the common, I don't want to say misconception, but it's the belief that 80% of the print quality issues can be attributed to 20% of the print settings. I've definitely seen in my long time, my history of 3D printing, that people have come out with a lot of different setting issues, the perfect slicer profiles, and that will magically make your prints perfect, great quality, no matter what kind of issues you're having. But the fact of the matter is, it is oftentimes just 20% of the print settings that can affect up to 80% of the actual print quality issues that you might be having. So we're going to go ahead and jump into those today, and we're going to discuss what those 20% of the print settings are. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to today's episode. Before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you guys for all the support. It really means the world to me. I've definitely been seeing it a lot lately, especially with the introduction of the video podcast. Your guys' support means the world to me, so thank you again. And with that being said, let's jump right into today's episode. So the very first print setting that we're going to be focusing on, and what in my opinion is the most important, is going to be the first layer setup. At the end of the day, you can have the most perfect dialed in print settings, filament settings, the perfect printer. You can have everything completely dialed in, and you won't be able to save a print if it has a bad first layer. In my opinion, the first layer is the most important part of 3D printing, and I don't think that's a uncommon belief. I think that a lot of people believe that the first print layer is going to be the most important. So the focus areas for this first layer to make sure that we're getting it good, or if you're having any problems, is going to be bed cleanliness. You want to make sure that you can clean your bed either with alcohol or just somewhat regularly. Make sure that you get any fingerprints off there, get the oil from your hands off of there, or any other oil maybe from the machine itself. You just want to make sure that you have the cleanest bed possible to give the filament that you're printing with the best chance to stick on that first layer. You're also going to want to worry about the Z offset. If your Z offset is wrong, it doesn't matter at all. You're not going to have a successful print, whether you're too close to the bed or you're too far away from the bed. You want to make sure that Z offset is as dialed in as you can possibly get it, so that you have the best chance at getting a good first layer every single time. And while it is true that some machines out there, like all of the Bambu Labs printers, have automatic first layer calibration, so you don't need to worry about it, there are definitely a lot of printers out there that still don't have that. I know for me, my Silva machines, I have an SVO8 and an SVO8 Max, and those do have quote unquote automatic first layer calibrations, but in my opinion, I think every single print I've ran, I've had to do a little bit of fine-tuning myself. I've had to baby step the Z offset. So there are definitely a lot of printers out there who still need help with that first layer calibration. So it's definitely something that's important to focus on. The next important print setting that we wanted to talk about is going to be the correct temperature for your filament. At the end of the day, it goes hand in hand with the first layer adhesion process, in that if everything else could be perfect, but if your temperature is off, you are going to have a hard time getting a successful print. Whether your printing is too hot, which could lead to filament stringing and blobbing and just any other issues. There's so many issues that can come when you're printing too hot. It just doesn't work out too good. And if you're printing too cold, you could lead to improper layer adhesion, under extrusion, because the filament is actually cooling too fast before it gets out of the nozzle, and then you're having blockage and just not a good flow rate. You also want to make sure that you are watching the bed temp as well, because the bed temp is pretty vital to the actual adhesion of that first layer. If you have a improper bed temperature, if you're printing too hot or too cold of a bed temperature, then you might not stick. Your first layer might not stick as well as it should, which is going to lead to problems pretty much no matter what. So, most failures, when you have print failures themselves, like stringing, weak parts, blobbing, under extrusion, when you have those issues, it can more often than not be traced back to print temperatures and bed temperatures. So make sure you're double checking that. You can definitely run some tests. A lot of printers have their own temperature tower sort of test where you can run filaments at different temperatures all in one print and kind of check the quality, check the stringing, check the overall printing of it, and make sure that you can kind of decide which temperature works best for you. Another aspect of printing that is going to be a part of this 20% of the print quality, the print settings that affects the print quality the most, is going to be proper print orientation. Now, this isn't officially a setting, but in my opinion, it's just as important and just as valuable as any of the other print settings. When you are making an object, whether you are downloading it from Thingiverse or something like that, it's already been designed, or whether you're designing it yourself, it is very, very important to consider print orientation. This is because oftentimes the least high quality parts of the part that you're printing is going to be where the support, if you have support on your part, where that touches where it supports and where it actually touches the print part itself, because that is just kind of how it is. I can't really explain it. It's just, at the end of the day, when you have support printing, chances are the surface that comes directly in contact with the support, it's not going to be as high quality as a normal part of the printed part that is not touching the support. And that's just kind of how it is. So the way I like to approach parts and part design is that if I can avoid using supports at all, then that's exactly what I want to do, because supports, oftentimes they kind of sink the quality of the part itself. So I'm always trying to make sure, if there's any way that I can go without it, or at the very least minimize the amount of supports that I'm using, then that's definitely something that I'm considering. Because the surface quality is going to be a big deal for most of my parts, especially with me running a business. Surface quality is a large part of the consideration that customers look at when they're getting their 3D printed parts. So I'm always trying to minimize, or if I can, just completely get rid of any supports that I may or may not use. So make sure that when you're designing a part, if you can, make sure you orient it in the slicing software or design it to make sure it uses as little supports as possible. The next setting that we're going to think of is going to be the wall count, the perimeters, whatever the setting is called in your slicing software, and also the infill percentage. A common mistake that the beginner 3D printers have, and I can admit that this was something that I did as well, is thinking that when you need a strong part to just crank the infill percentage up to 60, 70, 80, 90, even 100%. I was definitely one of those people when I first started 3D printing. When I needed a strong part, I kept the wall count exactly the same, and I just cranked up the infill percentage even as high as 100%, not knowing that when you print a fully solid part, it is actually not as strong as if you printed a part with, say, 20% infill, because if you print a part completely solid, there is a lot more shear points, and so if you drop it, it just kind of compromises the overall strength of the part. So if you can avoid it, unless it's specifically requested, you never, ever want to print a part completely solid if you can get away with it. But rather than cranking the infill up to such high numbers, it's probably just a waste of filament anyways. You want to look at the perimeters or the wall count, because oftentimes that is where the true strength of the part comes from. If you increase the wall count, your part gets infinitely stronger because it's more surface area of each previous layer that is bonding to the previous layer. And then that way, that's just increasing strength overall and making sure that you have that good layer adhesion, so that if you drop a part, if it's put under any stress, it's going to hold together and it's not going to shear off at any layer issues that you might have. So that is definitely going to be something that I've been preaching to people who are asking me, if you need stronger parts, don't go to the infill percentage first, go to the wall count first, because wall counts is definitely where the strength of your part comes from, more so than infill. And that's not to say completely ignore infill. Infill is still an important setting, and you definitely want to make it higher than the default 10 or 15% if you need stronger parts. But all I'm saying is that the wall count is going to help you out more so and save you time and filament than cranking the infill up to 70, 80% for not as much payoff as the extra material and the extra print time that comes with it. The last sort of setting we're going to look at, and again, it's not exactly a print setting, but it's something that I think is very important, is going to be making sure that you have reliable dry filament. And I know that you guys have heard a bunch of times, I've talked about it a bunch of times on the podcast, how important dry filament is, making sure that it hasn't absorbed a ton of moisture, because at the end of the day, if you have wet filament, there's nothing you can do to save it. It's going to not print correctly, and you're going to have issues, whether it be blobbing, whether it be, the water coming out as steam when you print it, and then that leaves open air gaps in your filament, which causes just tons of problems when you're printing. Just at the end of the day, nothing can save wet filament. So you want to make sure that your filament is as dry as it can possibly be. And especially with most printers nowadays coming with a setting where you can actually make it a filament dryer. Most of the time, I know the Bambu Lab printers, you can put a roll of filament down on the bed and then cover it with one of their cardboard filament boxes. And once you set the settings, it'll dry the filament for you, which is very helpful. So you don't even need any extra you don't need to buy an extra filament dryer. You can even DIY one. I did that with a food dehydrator and it works great. So that's definitely something to consider. Just overall, if you can have dry filament, it's just going to make the whole process so much easier. And if you have wet filament, it's almost guaranteed to be a failure. But another thing to think about is reliable filament. You don't want to just be buying the cheapest filament just because it's the cheapest. And I learned this the hard way. When I was first starting out with my business, I got a huge job. We're talking about 150 parts or 150 assemblies of 10 parts each. So that was 1,500 parts that I needed to make. And I went with the cheapest filament because I thought all filament was the same. I didn't think that it mattered. And this filament really bit me in the behind because this filament was really bad. I had to print with supports, and the supports were oftentimes welded to the part itself. And overall, the extra labor time that I spent trying to deal with this crappy filament was so much worse than if I just paid a couple extra dollars per kilogram and got nicer filament that worked correctly and worked the way I wanted to. And I've done work for this customer since then, and I always go with a higher end filament that I've come to like, and these supports pop right off. There's no issues with that at all. There's no issues with, the print itself. Just at the end of the day, that really kind of taught me a good lesson in if you have something that you really want to be good and you really want the part to turn out well, not only is the print settings and the filament settings and how dry your filament is, all of that matters, yes, but it also matters the reliability and the quality of the filament that you're getting. So that is definitely something to consider. So again, the 80-20 rule, that was kind of all the 20% of the settings that we want to look at that is going to help ensure that 80% of your quality is taken care of right there. So if you're new, we want to focus on mastering first layers, the first layer adhesion. That's very important. We want to make sure we have clean prints. Again, the correct temperature for your filament. That's going to be very, very important. Proper print orientation, minimizing or completely getting rid of supports if we can. The wall count and perimeters over the infill percentage if you're looking for stronger parts, and then reliable and dry filament. We don't want to focus on, if you need stronger parts, go to the exotic materials, the carbon fiber nylons, the PEEK, etc. We don't want to work on the extreme speeds or heavy mods. We just want the absolute basics. We want to master the simple skills so that we can turn out the most consistent results. So that is definitely something that we want to work on and consider. But with that being said, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope we kind of touched on this subject nicely about how 20% of the settings or the considerations in a 3D print can oftentimes account for 80% or even 90% of the print quality and how it turns out well. So if you guys are interested in supporting me, please go ahead and subscribe wherever you are. You can also head over to Patreon, where you can get all these episodes released ad-free and a week early. And there are also some other perks like exclusive monthly bonus episodes. So definitely something to consider supporting me if you would like to. If not, no worries at all. I appreciate everybody who listens. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.